We'll get going. Great. Well, let me just say two words and then I'll pass it over to Jane. Welcome, everybody. The Climate Action Office is doing a number of meetings today and tomorrow about the federal funding opportunities that the state of Vermont is looking to capitalize on. And I'll let Jane Lazorchak and Megan O'Toole and others give the details about this. This meeting in particular was an opportunity for climate counselors and others to learn about what's going on in this prioritization effort and the federal funding effort. And we're going to do one tonight and one tomorrow as well that are sort of wide open for the public. And we have a good number of folks registered for those, which is great. Today, we'll do a little demo of what this is going to look like for those public meetings as well. But let me turn it over to Jane to kick us off and give us a little more understanding about what really is going on and why this is important for the council, the Climate Council in particular, to be aware of the efforts going on at the Climate Action Office and state government more broadly. So Jane, over to you.
Thanks so much, David. If folks at any point can't hear my voice that well, I can see David, Megan, and June. So you are the lucky three who I can see. So if you just signal that my voice is going in or out, just let me know.
You're good with that stage voice. Thanks, Jane.
Good with the stage voice. It takes me back to my youth. My dad used to make me do this. Scarred by parents. So I really appreciate you all coming and joining this afternoon over lunch. Megan O'Toole and myself have been co-leading the development of the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant on behalf of the Climate Action Office and in service of many of the agencies that you all are here representing today. This is a really unique opportunity for state government to access additional resources over the next 5 years to direct federal funding to where we need it most to help us with our mitigation opportunities. And so we're going to talk more about the grant itself, how it fits into the climate action planning process, where we are in the process right now, the unique opportunity and what is eligible. And then Megan's going to take you through specifically what we've heard and lifted up to date, and then have a conversation with all of you about what we might be missing right now and how this might complement or serve other areas that you see it for need in your community or at your agencies or elsewhere. So as David said, this presentation is very similar to what we will do with the public tonight and tomorrow, but it has a little bit more context for climate counselors in particular to understand where this fits in and the overlap that this will have specifically with climate action plan updates. And so why don't I just jump right in and do that for you all. But I just wanted to highlight, if it feels jargony at times, we kind of expect that you all can stay with us a little more than maybe the public can. So this has a little more jargon intentionally for all of you, because I know that some of this will be relevant for you all. So I sort of started to hint at all of this, but Megan and I are going to walk you through the overview of the opportunity and the process, and really share with you what has come up through that prioritization that we've done collaboratively with many of the agencies represented here today and others that have a stake in climate action. Knowing that ANR is not the only one in this space, we worked really collaboratively with many of the staff across agencies to get us where we are today. And then we really want to provide as much time as possible to hear from all of you with your questions, as well as ideas for things that we're missing as an opportunity to inform the process and shape where we're going. So you may remember back it's probably been 6 months now, but we provided an update to the Climate Council on the good work of the Climate Action Office that we're engaged in. And one of those components was around the application for the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants. Back in the spring, we worked through the Interagency Advisory Board to the Climate Action Office to think about a space for which what state government would work to stand in and apply for what was called the planning grant component of the CPRG funds. And the Climate Action Office was uniquely positioned, largely because of the capacity we provide to coordinate and amplify the work across not only ANR, but also all of the other agencies. So because of that unique experience, we essentially opted in to the climate pollution reduction grants back in the spring, March of 2023. And in July of this summer, we were awarded what's called a planning grant. And by doing that and opting in for that $3 million, we obligated ourselves to a series of deliverables, the first of which is the Priority Climate Action Plan development. That name, Priority Climate Action Plan, is something that we will explain throughout this process with all of you, but something that we're really trying to actually not amplify and speak to as much as possible, because it implies this is somehow the state's priorities for climate action. But really what the PCAP is an amplification of opportunities that are eligible for this funding. So it's really a statement around what climate solutions are either not seeing project progress or don't have funding and align with what is required of this grant. That PCAP is what we're going to talk with you all about today, the actions, the measures that we've lifted up for that. And that's the first deliverable that by submitting by March 1st of this year, makes the state eligible to access implementation grant funds, which are due very quickly on the backs of submittal of the Priority Climate Action Plan, April 1st. And we'll get into what the funding looks like in more detail, but that is essentially a pool of funds that states and municipalities are available to apply for, that total $4.3 billion, another $300 million for tribes, but $4.6 billion that'll go out in one round of funding to service mitigation opportunities lifted up through these Priority Climate Action Plans. We expect to be awarded that funding in the summer. We'll find out in the summer of 2024 if we got it. And then the funds will actually hit bank accounts in the fall of 2024. And then the final component of the planning grant that we wanted to mention to all of you is that the biggest deliverable of taking that $3 million is actually the development of something called a comprehensive climate action plan, which is an economy-wide climate action plan. Serendipitously, it is actually due to the EPA the same month and year that our climate action plan is due. And so I kind of want to put a pin in that, because that will require more thought and conversation with the Climate Council, understanding that the State Climate Action Office, us, will want to use our CAP essentially as our CCAP come July 1st of 2025. So alignment of those two planning documents is what I wanted to make sure we just sort of park for now, and know that future engagement with the Climate Council will require some discussion. And I think that will really come into focus when we meet in January for that all-day meeting to really launch us into the next plan process for the CAP. So here we are, we're talking about the Priority Climate Action Plan. I want to just set the stage for what the funding is and isn't, and how we rolled out the prioritization and consideration for the development of measures. And then again, Megan's going to really walk you through those details of that to inform a dialogue and discourse with all of you. So Vermont is really well positioned. You can imagine climate pollution reduction grants, they're going out to, I believe, Megan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was 48 states, all but South Dakota and Iowa or one other state that didn't opt into that planning grant. So many states are in variable phases of climate planning and climate laws. Vermont, as you can imagine, is one of the states as best positioned to take access of these funds, because we have a robust climate action plan. It's fairly up to date. We have been doing the science and monitoring the greenhouse gas inventory work for more than a decade now. And so we're in a really good position to stand up and speak to where this funding can have the most leverage and provide for the most opportunity, building on and informed by the plan that we worked on with all of you on behalf of the Climate Council. So a reminder, I don't need to tell you all this, but recognizing that there are some new counselors on the line today, this plan was adopted in 2021. It has to be updated again in 2025, July 1st. Going forward, it'll be every 4 years from that date in July. And so we have this plan. It has 235 plus actions within it. Actions are the term that we as a state used for those operational tasks to actually move the needle on climate action. That really aligns well with the term measures that the EPA is using for climate pollution reduction grants. So understanding that we have this robust suite of actions for our plan, we really saw this as an opportunity to advance monitoring and tracking progress around where we are with the plan and think about gaps and opportunities. So just to reinforce that process, this plan is really largely being implemented across state government. I mean, many of the actions are cross-cutting around the state, but most of the implementation falls to state government, for better or worse, in partnership with all of you and in partnership with legislature and others. But it was really a nice space for us to review where we are on progress. And so to stand up the PCAP for this planning exercise, we actually built a tracking tool as a precursor to that larger measuring and tracking progress tool that we will be building over the next few years, that pulled in all 230 plus actions into one Excel spreadsheet. It articulated who the lead implementer was with respect to state government for all of those actions. And it allowed us to go through and say where we were making significant progress on those actions and where they had not seen any progress, and think about where the lack of progress signaled a need for financial resources to move the needle. So this was the start and the basis for thinking about how we worked collaboratively with the lead implementers, the Public Service Department, Agency of Transportation, Agency of Commerce and Community Development, Ag, and others, to really review a status and provide a status report of the climate action plan. In doing that, and sort of once we had that list of priority actions, we needed to really narrow down further and think about how we move across the actions that actually fit into this bucket. It didn't mean that we were going to forget about the other actions that weren't seeing progress. We were going to think about, as an office, how to channel those into other spaces. But this unique opportunity to apply for additional resources really needed to align with the funding requirements, of which they're quite specific for climate pollution reduction grants. So a reminder that this is one-time competitive process for $4.6 billion. 300 million of that is going to tribes and territories, but 4.3 million is coming to states. Vermont is likely to apply in the range of about $90 million. There are buckets of applications of the way they're going to review competitiveness, and those tiers of funding. The higher you go up in the tiers, aka the more money you ask for, the less applications they intend to fund. And those really those really big bucket applications, the multi-$100 million applications, they're really going to fall for regional applications that are coalitions across many states. And we've been consulting really closely with our partners in the Northeast, as well as our partnership through the U.S. Climate Alliance, to understand where Vermont will likely be most competitive. And it's in that $50 to $100 million bucket, 50 to 99 million. And we're hopeful that by staying within that reasonable range, that Vermont will have a very good chance of walking away with the money that we asked for, understanding that the EPA really has signaled that they want to give a state, every state, some amount of money. And Vermont, our state application through the Climate Action Office, which will cover multiple agencies, will be the only application likely for the state of Vermont, and therefore our only chance, and hopefully that makes us pretty competitive. Any of the measures or the actions that we lift up in this grant must show a measurable reduction in climate pollution. So you'll notice that while we understand that climate action has to occur across all these areas to make an important difference, that we really need to focus in on those primary actions that have a benefit to either cut climate pollution, aka cut greenhouse gas emissions through a quantifiable method, or mitigate climate action through sequestration and storage. So seeing a change in land management that enhances that is something we can quantify, also carries forward as a primary target within this application. any of the actions that solely have adaptation and resilience benefits, and we cannot quantify, don't apply for this application. However, many of the actions and the planning and thought we put into this, the actions that we'll tell you about today, have those as co-benefits, and that helps elevate them as even that much more significant. So while primary benefit cannot be adaptation and resilience, we've really been thinking a lot about how to fold that in, knowing how important that is for climate action in Vermont as well. Before I turn it over to Megan to really highlight the criteria we use to lift up measures and actions, I did just want to ground us again in where our emissions are coming from, and think about both where we've seen the most action through other federal funding, through ARPA, through additional resources coming in through the infrastructure bill, as well as other areas of the Inflation Reduction Act. We also want to think about areas in our inventory and our emissions where we haven't seen a lot of progress. And so this is updated, working in partnership with Energy Action Network and Jared's shop, to look at our most up-to-date inventory, which was 2020. So obviously an area, a year where we saw a significant dip in our emissions because of transportation emissions declining during the pandemic. So it's hard to tell still exactly how much of that will be lasting. But for now, transportation is still our largest bucket for emissions reductions and largest area of opportunity for further reductions. Thermal, as you all know, is second. And agriculture, which we are really excited about in this space, especially around the co-benefits, as well as thinking about sequestration and storage, is our third area. And we've been able to think about a lot of opportunities in this space for these funds. So I'm going to turn it over to Megan now to talk specifically about the prioritization and how we thought about lifting up measures for you all today, and then review those measures with all of you.
Thanks, Jane. Can you all hear me okay?
You sound great.
Okay, great. So as Jane mentioned, over the course of this year, the Climate Action Office has been working with both state agency and external partners, as well as regional and municipal partners, to review and do some further prioritization work that happened beyond what occurred for the Climate Action Plan to the actions in that plan, and with a focus towards this particular funding opportunity and what might be ripe to seek additional funding to implement additional mitigation actions and opportunities that were originally included in the Climate Action Plan. So in the course of this review, we felt it important to ask a series of questions to kind of see what bubbled to the surface. So first, we wanted to understand if there's a lack of funding available for a particular action in the Climate Action Plan, or is there a set of actions or an action that's being implemented or is advancing towards implementation where there is a clear need for additional funding based on what we know about the significance of the impact of a particular action towards climate mitigation, or if the action has been, so successful at moving the needle and mitigating climate changing emissions that we want to increase the scope or the scale of that particular opportunity. We also asked whether or not the action was likely to benefit Vermonters in an equitable way and create measurable benefits to low-income and disadvantaged communities. That's a really important criteria for this funding opportunity. So we wanted to make sure that we were thinking about that really early in the process. Also, as Jane mentioned, these actions all originally came from the work that went into the Climate Action Plan. So we wanted to make sure that there was alignment with that plan. And then, as Jane mentioned, all of the actions do need to have a quantifiable and measurable climate mitigation benefit. So we need to be able to demonstrate to the EPA that the action itself will result in, a certain quantity of climate changing emissions being reduced or sequestered. Next slide, please. So in order to answer the questions about where there is a funding need, as I mentioned, we did work with state agencies and external partners to determine where the resources are already flowing. And again, in the event an action is being implemented, if additional resources would benefit that action in terms of reducing climate pollution. So we know that the state has one of the most robust incentive programs for passenger sized cars that are electric vehicles. There is at least 5 different programs being implemented to get people out of their internal combustion engine passenger cars and into a cleaner form of transportation, whether that be an electric vehicle, utilizing other opportunities like public transit and ride sharing, or electric bike incentives. So we know that those are already on the ground and they're very popular and in many cases oversubscribed. So we know that that's something that's working. There is quite a few different opportunities for weatherization and fuel switching, not only for residential application, but also for businesses and for multi-unit dwellings. We know that the Department of Buildings and General Services is implementing the Municipal Energy Resilience Program, which allows municipalities to compete for funding to implement energy assessments and then implement the necessary fuel switching and thermal improvements that those assessments prescribe. So we know that that's a really significant program that's helping our cities and towns make changes in terms of mitigating emissions. We know that we have funneled a lot of public funding to electric vehicle charging. Vermont has the highest number of public charging stations per capita in the country, so we're seeing a lot of success in that program. And then we also have a really robust focus on public transit, fuel switching to electric buses. And then also EPA has a really significant program. And I'm sorry, my cat wants to join us for the presentation today. EPA has a really robust program to help provide grants to school districts and public schools to switch to electric school buses. So that's just a few examples of some really great work that is ongoing right now that we would be interested in building off of with this opportunity. Next slide, please. So knowing that there are many opportunities right now, both federal and state, in terms of funding that's already available and flowing to address climate change, both from a mitigation and an adaptation and resilience perspective, we really need to understand and consider this fund's unique place in meeting Vermont's needs in terms of climate mitigation. Every state is different. Every state is differently situated in terms of its planning and its implementation progress. And so we need to really understand how to best utilize this funding to fill gaps in the existing work that we're doing related to mitigation. There's no federal match required for this funding opportunity. And so that means that we really have an opportunity to seek a significant amount of funding and to personalize that funding to meet Vermont's needs and again, fill those gaps in existing resources. So we need to look at all sectors of the economy to ask more questions about how these funds can be most effectively used to impact our emissions and positively impact Vermont and Vermonters themselves. Next slide, please. So first, looking at the natural and working land sector, we have 2 opportunities here related to land use and agricultural emissions, and we can use this as an opportunity to really move the needle in our 3rd largest emitting sector, which is the agricultural sector, to increase farming practices that reduce and capture carbon emissions. And then the other side of land use is related to our forests and other natural working lands and land conservation and protecting and managing land in ways that we can enhance climate benefits and manage the land differently in additional ways to further sequester carbon and have those significant impacts from a sequestration perspective. So some examples in the agricultural sector that we could consider are increasing cover cropping and plantings along waterways and capitalizing on a lot of the existing resources and funding programs that exist in the ag sector that have been in the past primarily with a focus on water quality mitigation, but that can also have climate mitigating benefits as well. So looking to use those existing opportunities from a mitigation perspective. And then also helping farmers invest in lower emitting infrastructure to reduce their fuel use and other emissions from farming practices and the equipment that they use. And then on the forest use side, again, understanding how we can implement more climate-friendly forest management on existing parcels of land, or further conserve and restore forests and wetlands so that they can capture and store more carbon. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, we've made a lot of progress in transitioning to electric technology in our transportation sector. There is obviously a lot more work to be done. I was able to understand a really significant update to our EV implementation last week when we were provided with the results of our last quarter electric vehicle uptake data in Vermont, which showed that Vermont is very quickly approaching 15% of all new vehicle sales being either plug-in hybrid electric vehicles or battery electric vehicles. So that's really significant and shows that we're actually exceeding our targets at this point in time for that transition. And we expect to cross the 15% threshold as early as next year, which is really exciting and means that these programs are really working. So how do we make them even more impactful, and then also allow everyone to be able to access and participate in the electric vehicle transition? So looking at how we can further reduce the upfront incentives of new and used electric vehicles and really work on building a robust used electric vehicle market. Thinking about transitioning heavy trucks to electric vehicle technology, how can we offer fleets and businesses the technical support and training that they need to do that, both pre and post deployment of those vehicles? And then also what type of purchase incentive would be appropriate for those heavier trucks to help bridge that gap between the incremental cost of an electric vehicle versus a traditional diesel truck. We also can look at ways to mitigate emissions from trucks that still have a relatively long useful life in front of them, and looking to reduce some of the idle related emissions from those trucks in terms of the auxiliary equipment that they use and how that could be differently powered. And then also thinking about how we engage in land use planning to reduce travel and reduce the amount of vehicle miles traveled that Vermonters use every year. And then further expanding EV charging programs so that folks that rent their homes or live in multi-unit dwellings can have access to charging at home, which we know it really helps to see those results in terms of lower costs related to operation of an electric vehicles, with the fuel being traditionally less expensive than an internal combustion engine, but really only if you can have that access to charging where you live. So that's a really important item to consider as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so looking at the building sector, both residential and commercial and industrial buildings, as I mentioned, we've made a lot of progress and have been implementing a number of programs related to weatherization and fuel switching for low and moderate income Vermonters. But we want to understand how we can implement these programs better so that folks that already are eligible for these programs can actually access them and avail themselves of the benefits of these programs and save money to have little to no cost transition in weatherizing and fuel switching. So we have an existing network of energy coaches that folks can work with to understand how to access these services, but it's really clear that that type of service needs to be more broad, and just that there needs to be more energy coaches available, that needs to align also with financial coaching services that some of the entities where these energy coaches exist can also utilize. And then also, understanding that no matter who you are, these programs can be difficult to navigate and figure out how to access. And so expanding the scope of that energy coaching program to be available to all Vermonters as well as businesses in those commercial and industrial type buildings. And then, as I mentioned, the Municipal Energy and Resilience Program is already off the ground and being implemented by BGS and is just past the second phase of that program. But we understand from BGS that that program is likely to be significantly oversubscribed. And so understanding how we can help to add additional money to that ARPA funded program, where towns might not be able to seek all or receive all the funding that they need to meet their goals and implement their energy assessments that they conduct with the MERP program. So that's a way that we can help further support municipalities to meet their mitigation goals. Next slide, please. So finally, want to take a close look at the waste sector, which is actually a sector that we didn't address as robustly as some of the other sectors in the Climate Action Plan. And so looking at this funding opportunity as a way that we can make significant reductions in this sector. So when I say the waste sector, we're talking about the emissions that are caused from waste disposal. So reducing the amount of waste that we produce can obviously directly impact that. So looking to work with different entities and institutions to increase recycling and composting at schools, and to launch a more robust effort to give schools the infrastructure and the tools that they need to reduce waste. And then also the educational resources that go with that infrastructure and those tools. We've made significant steps in reducing emissions of high global warming potential refrigerants, which are components of our air conditioning units and other appliances that we operate every day in our homes and commercial buildings. So understanding how we can dispose safely of that equipment at the end of its useful life, but then also mitigate emissions during the operation of that equipment so that we're not releasing those really potent greenhouse gases. And this type of activity in the climate mitigation space is really regarded as kind of the low-hanging fruit of climate mitigation. It's very supported by industry and the manufacturers of these refrigerants and appliances. And so we want to continue to really capitalize on that partnership and make strides in reducing those emissions. And then finally, partnering with our solid waste management entities that operate our landfills and transfer stations throughout the state to understand how we can help them reduce emissions from the operation of those facilities, or enhance operation at those facilities so that they can install infrastructure that allows them to ensure that more material gets recycled, or to mitigate emissions from other aspects of their operation. And I think that is the final slide going through the various sectors that we have, where we've identified actions and kind of asked ourselves questions about what more we can do in these sectors. So now is an opportunity to hear from you all about what we've missed or what you think needs to be modified in terms of the priorities that we have discussed. And I'll turn it over to Sophie. Thank you so much.
I think David you'll actually take it from here.
Sure. Happy to step in.
Sorry about that, David. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Jane. Okay. All right. So that was a great presentation of the thought process that's gone into the work. And what I'd love to do is for climate counselors, do a quick sort of round of questions or thoughts you have for Megan and Jane. And then I wanted to demo some of the things we're going to do in the public meetings. They're a little more interactive. But I wanted to just, because we're here with climate counselors, just give an open space for reactions that you would have about how the state government is approaching this federal opportunity. So climate counselors, questions, clarifying questions, initial reactions you want to share right now about this work and what the state of Vermont's about to do. Yeah, we're happy to share the slides again as needed. Michelle?
I'll jump in and indicate what a tremendous opportunity this is, and just to congratulate the current and prior staff on the vision of having us be ready for what we did not know might be a great opportunity. Obviously, there are benefits across the spectrum, and it's great to see that these funds will potentially be able to supplement or replace funds we have had to set aside, or we've chosen to set aside in the early stages of mitigating GHG emissions, in particular through the transportation system, through the incentive program. So to see federal money coming in that will be able to support that is an excellent pathway. And I will be interested to better understand the data relative to the choices in terms of the priorities. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah. Other counselors, quick reactions, questions you have about how this is all rolling out? I, for one, am super interested to understand how the work of the council and the initial climate action plan is informing this work. But just counselors, anything else you'd want to check in with Jane and Megan on? So quiet. Okay. That's fine. I guess that means everyone's super excited about the pathway forward that Megan and Jane and, and everybody's doing. Yeah, Bram's like, yeah, this is great. Okay. So, one of the things we're going to be doing in the public meetings is trying to provide different ways for people to offer input. I think we're going to have a slightly shorter presentation in the meetings tonight and tomorrow. And then we're going to use some tools to try to draw people out. Maybe it's going to be quiet like it is right now. So, Sophie, if you could drop in the chat that that link I provided. So if you go to this link, this is a way to do a first question. And this first question is about those 4 areas that Megan presented. Remember, she talked about the 4 areas they've been settling on as like the most likely priority areas based on those questions. So natural and working lands, transportation, the buildings and heating sector, and then solid waste. And within those 4, how would this funding be most meaningful for you and your community? Right? That's sort of what that question is. So let me know if anybody is able. I'm not seeing any responses just yet, but if you want to take a moment and just type in some thoughts, like when you think about those 4 areas, what really makes this additional funding meaningful? How should it be oriented? What specific things might be particularly helpful right now? How to address some of the equity challenges that might be present when you start funding things like this. Like, take a moment and do it. Is anybody able to open that up and type something in? Yeah? Okay, great. I'll just sit here for a moment and see if anything comes out, and I'll share my screen as it starts to do it. Take a moment. Everybody on this who's joining us. Great. I'm starting to see some things coming in. I'll share my screen in just a second.
And are you asking about what we think would be most meaningful in each of the 4 areas, or which of the 4 areas it should be focused on?
I think within those 4 areas broadly, and whatever comes first to mind, Bram, I would say in any of those 4 areas, if you can see an opportunity, you think it's important to express it so that it's meaningful. So you don't need to choose between them. This is stuff's going to happen in all 4. And Michelle, I'm seeing yours in the chat. Thanks for that. So I'll show you the kinds of things that are coming in as you're thinking what you want to do. Right? These are the kinds of things that are coming in. 2 comments around stacking, additional technical assistance, thinking about multi-year support, and then expanding the impact of existing. I bet that's a missing S on that, existing programs. I'm just going to leave my screen up for a little bit. Keep typing away and take a peek at what's coming in if you're done typing. So for this group online, is anybody else still typing away and needs just a moment more? Oh, I see some stuff coming in, so I'll give it a moment more. Close my door. Okay, so in the public meeting, what we're going to do is also, once we've given a moment for people to write some things down, then there's a moment where you can go through, and if you see something that someone else wrote and you really like it, you can put a little sort of vote check on it. And I've set up the system so you can do 3 of those, 3 little checks on it. So when I do an enter here, I'm going to wait just a second to see if anything else comes in. You'll be able to go in and select 3 of these that seem particularly meaningful for you. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to drop my slides now, and you should be able to see, if you go back to where you're just typing, everybody else's responses, and you can put a little click, like a little vote click, next to 3 of them. And if anybody's having a hard time with it, just let me know. And I'll note the other things that are in the chat, which didn't really make it into the tool. I'll give you just a moment to go ahead and do that.
David, I don't know if anybody else is experiencing this, but my view changed and I can't vote anymore.
Oh, no.
Correct.
Okay, there we go. It's
There we
back
go.
now.
Sorry, guys. That
Thank
was a
you.
little glitchy thing on my part.
Okay.
How's that now?
Good.
I'm just going to leave it a little more because I can see folks are actually doing this. Thank you all for diving in here and trying this out. Just give it a second more. I realized when I click the button so to look at it, it ends up ending the voting. So I wanted to give everyone a chance. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a peek at it. The last little clicks. Oh, it's still coming in, so I'm hesitant to hit the button. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a peek at it. I'll share my screen. Apologies if I just cut you off in the middle of your voting exercise. So again, this is just one way to get a sense of what's going on in the room of people who happen to be here right now. This is not anything scientific. It's more of where is their interest and enthusiasm. So a lot of folks found some enthusiasm around this. Direct funding for electrification upgrades directly in customer homes, multifamily homes, and support training workforce for doing that. The stacking conversation got to help in particularly uptake for existing programs by low-income Vermonters, right? Things that have multiple benefits, resilience and emissions reductions. Stacking again.
David, do you have the ability to start to combine things like that since stacking came up
Right.
twice?
I'm not sure I can do that in real time with like this. So it does create this problem where there's, very similar things. Let me look into that before tonight and see if I could manage that tonight a little bit better. But this is just a way, again, it's not very scientific, just getting a sense where there's some interest and enthusiasm, technical assistance and navigators, transportation, and affordability of EVs, right? Some ag stuff here. And this is about existing programs. Okay, and there's more, right? And obviously we can share this, and this is a helpful input. I will note there were some comments in the chat as well that didn't make it into the Menti. So if you haven't taken a look at those, check them out. Michelle puts in about the reduction of the need for solely funding with limited state dollars, continued ramp up of transportation greenhouse gas reductions through electrification. And then Grace says simple, straightforward payment programs for contractors doing the work. Okay, so that was in the chat as well. Okay, so thanks for helping to demo that and realize where we might be able to do things a little better tonight. And I'm curious, folks who are on this call right now, when you did that exercise and when you saw the results, are there things you want to make sure that Jane and Megan and the folks at the Climate Action Office hear loud and clear? Like, are there important things to say out loud that anybody wants to share right now? We're feeling kind of quiet today, it seems like. Everybody's having their lunch. Liz, go ahead, please.
Hey, sorry I'm not on camera. I could go on camera, but it would be dark probably, but I'll try.
Okay.
Hopefully you can see me. There you
You're
yeah,
good.
you can see me okay. I don't know if this is a reason for the relative quiet, but it's my reason, so I'll just share it. I thought the overview was helpful, and I think that for a public meeting, if you want more specific feedback, it could be helpful to move the presentation from the general to the specific by providing the public some examples of the programs and funding opportunities that are already underway. Because at least for me, as someone who's been following this, it still is difficult to feel exactly where this fits into the work the state's already doing. And I feel like a further click down in some of the description given to folks could be helpful for that. Also, just even more granularly, tying the initial timeline slide when you then speak later about the climate pollution grant specifics, you might just really very specifically tell people what you're planning in terms of timing on any draft submission, or what is anything happening ahead of April that will be a further opportunity, so that if they are engaged this evening but wondering about more specifics, they know if they will have an opportunity on those. Thanks.
That's really helpful, Liz. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Another question that we're going to be testing in the public meetings is, in addition to the 4 areas that Megan laid out, are there other things that appear to be completely missing that would meet these criteria? Things that maybe aren't captured in those 4 areas but seem like a really strong priority for Vermont as it goes after these federal funds. Again, these federal funds have some restrictions and they need to really be focused on emissions reductions. But is there anything outside of those 4 areas or something you were surprised you didn't hear Megan say because it seems like such an obvious fit for something like this? Is there anything on people's minds in that arena beyond the 4 buckets? Okay. All right. So, let's see. This has been helpful. I would certainly create a little space right now if folks want to weigh in. Final questions they have or thoughts they have, feel free to drop in the chat as well. Anything else that Jane and Megan and all that team needs to know as they take the next steps? Yeah. And yes, and when I said that, I'm opening up to everybody on the call right now. If folks are not climate counselors, folks are just listening in, this is a great time if you'd like to drop something in the chat, just like Karen dropped in the chat saying focus on Vermont lending with answers for rural areas. Marley asked, can you share how these polling results will be used? I doubt many farmers will be in the public meetings. For example, the polling will only reflect those who show up. Yes, that's exactly right, Marley. So these polling results are more about the interaction that they create than the results themselves. So the way they'll be used is to spur some conversation. We'll note in the meeting summaries that these are the kinds of things that, were selected when folks were given the option, but they're not being used in any formal way in decision-making. So thanks, Marley, for that important caveat. Anything else from anybody on the call today that you'd like to share? Or advice for us tonight and tomorrow as we head into some public meetings on this? Okay. Great. Well, Jane, just back over to you for a moment. Any closing thoughts about timing? Maybe speaking to Liz's question about sort of real specificity about timing and the next steps over the coming 3-4 months.
Sure. So from here, after the public meetings, we'll be working on a summary of comments and sharing that with the Interagency Advisory Board to the Climate Action Office next week. Our goal is to submit the Priority Climate Action Plan to the Environmental Protection Agency by the end of January, so that we have some time to really consider the transition from that plan to the implementation grant, which is due April 1st. Over the winter, we do plan to roll out additional opportunities to engage with the public. We've been thinking particularly about, to Marley's question, actually going to the stakeholders specifically who have representation around measures and actions in the plan. So we've been working with Sophie in our office to think about a list of existing events and engagement spaces that we can go to and bring this with us to talk with them about the opportunities and actions within the plan. So as we roll that out and think about how to communicate that, we will add that in for tonight and tomorrow and be sure to update the council on the work that we do across the winter so that there's further opportunities to engage with all of you around that final implementation grant later before it goes in the spring.
That's great. Okay. So unless a final thought from anybody on the call? Well, I want to thank folks for spending a little bit of their lunchtime with us today. If you'd like to join again, we're doing it tonight and tomorrow at 5:30 tonight and 11:30 tomorrow. And I really appreciate the feedback in particular about how to make this better for those engagements that we're going to do and try to be a little more specific. Thanks, everybody. With that, we'll close up today. and happy to be in touch with anyone who wants to discuss this in more detail. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.